All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. This is John with Murder by the Book, coming to you with another live virtual event. We're so excited to have James Rollins back with us to talk about his new book, Unrestricted Access. We were just talking before this, back in March or early April. He was like the second one of these virtual events that we did. So it feels like it was a lifetime ago because we've now done like over 70 of these. We are really excited tonight to have him joined by Ryan Steck, who is with The Real Book Spy. So I'm going to get these guys introduced, and then I will turn it over to Ryan so they can chat. While they're chatting, if you guys have questions for James, you can leave those in the Facebook comments. I'll be chatting with you guys there. And once Ryan and James are done chatting, I will pop back on to relay any of those questions. So James Rollins is the author of the international thrillers that have been translated into more than 40 languages. His Sigma series has been lauded as one of the top crowd pleasers by the New York Times and one of the hottest summer reads by People magazine. In each novel, acclaimed for its originality, Rollins unveils unseen worlds, scientific breakthroughs, and historical secrets, and he does it all at breakneck speed and with stunning insight. He lives in the Sierra Nevada mountains. Again, we're really excited to have Ryan Steck with us. He has been praised by Lisa Scottolini, who you guys know is one of our favorite people in the world, as one of the hardest working, most thoughtful, and fairest reviewers out there. His site, therealbookspy.com, is the go-to site on all things thriller and mystery. It features author interviews, news about their books and new releases, and Ryan reads and reviews each book that appears on the site. He also works full-time as a freelance editor and pens a monthly thriller column for Crime Reads. So I'm gonna let you guys chat and I will see you in just a little bit.
Hey there.
So Jim, how are you?
I'm doing good. I was studying John's bookshelves back there. I always love the fact that we can spy in everybody's little libraries and see what's on their shelves. And he's got a very neat shelves. I'm very envious of how neat and orderly his bookshelf is back there.
I mean, yours looks pretty organized too, by the way, though. I mean, right over your shoulder there.
Just because it's staged.
Yeah.
Back there. This part, not so much.
Well, let's talk. I mean, obviously, this is not like a normal book tour for you. This is the 2020 version of a book tour, right? So how are things? How are you filling time in quarantine social distancing this year? And how are the virtual book tours going?
You know, it's back when my last Sigma novel came out. It came out the end of March. So I had a whole tour booked. And then within 24 hours, 48 hours of when I was supposed to get on the plane and leave, everything got canceled, everything switched digitally. So at that point, it was nobody was ready for the digital sphere. You know, it was a challenge and juggling, trying to figure out how to do it. What's the proper format? You know, how do you get signatures out to people? Do you do book plates? Do you try to do something digitally? Now we're, half a year into this whole situation, and it's even though there's many different platforms, it works a lot better. I do miss book tours. This is nothing like the energy you get from being in a bookshop. Just because I like to go early into a bookshop and I can look around the shelves and I get books I get recommendations from the bookstore owners. This is a sort of a flat comparison to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, I think that the tours are probably running a little smoother now, these virtual tours, than when everyone sort of had a crash course in them all at the same time there in early March and from then till now. Yeah, I've also been told this is probably a thing that's here to stay, these hybrid tours that some people are doing. And kudos to the bookstores for adapting and finding a way to still put these on, because they're so great. A lot of these, and I know you've been doing a few of them, and I watched one with Barbara Peters the other night. That was a fantastic interview. So I wanted to ask you, I was sitting down looking at your career. Obviously, we're going to talk about Unrestricted Access, but you released your first novel, Subterranean. Was that 1999?
1998.
98. Did you ever think, sitting around in 1998, that you'd still be doing book tours and writing books today?
No. When I first started to write, my goal was just to be able to walk into a bookstore and find one of my books on a shelf. And now I'm working on my 38th novel, so now I own the entire shelf. So that's pretty cool. But again, my first book was a mass paperback original. It wasn't a hardback. Very small advance. Definitely not enough to quit the day job as a veterinarian. So it was just a hobby. It was something fun to do on the side. Put a little bit of cash in my back pocket, but nothing significant. So I never thought it was going to be a career change. I thought I'll maybe throw a book out every now and again, and then that book ended up hitting the lower end of the bestseller list. The next book a little higher, the next book a little bit higher. I always called myself a sort of a stealth bestseller, sort of snuck up on the list. That was not that instant, right out of the gate, bestseller. I had to sort of sneak my way up that list, and then that became more and more demand of my time to produce novels. And eventually, at that point, I've been practicing for 15 years as a veterinarian, and I began trying to sort of transitioning from full-time veterinarian to part-time writer, to part-time veterinarian to full-time writer. So that took a couple of years to make that transition over, but it still seems a weird course. I mean, a lot of lawyers, become novelists. That's not too surprising. A lot of medical doctors, Michael Crichton becomes an author. Not too many veterinarians. So I'm just waiting for the other veterinary thriller writers to come out there. There are just not that many of us out there.
Walk me through that. So you're a veterinarian, which is very hard to do, by the way. I mean, that's like, tougher than to get into med school, right? So you were sitting around like, this wasn't hard enough. I need another challenge. I want to go out and try to become a published author because the odds are really terrible for that too. And so you just went for it. What made you decide to want to be a writer?
Well, I've explained this in bookstore talks before, where I knew from a young age, from third grade, that I wanted to be a veterinarian. I got that assignment you get in third grade, go home, write an essay on what you want to be when you grow up. I knew I wanted to be a veterinarian, sat at my desk, blank sheet of paper in front of me. It was a point of moral dilemma because I knew I wanted to be a veterinarian, I just didn't know how to spell it. So I thought I could switch to something else, but no, I thought I'm going to be a veterinarian. I'm going to put down veterinarian, looked it up in the dictionary. But at the same time, I liked spinning stories. I had 3 brothers and 3 sisters. My goal in life was to terrorize them, try to convince them of outlandish tales. If tears were involved, all the better. So there's that side of my brain that just loves to tell these stories. And at the same time, I love to read growing up. And if you're reading, it's like throwing gasoline on that twisted corner of my brain. So, but never seemed like it was a clear career track to becoming an author. The path to become a veterinarian was fairly well established. You do this, and this, so you can become a successful veterinarian. You can do this, and this, and fail horribly as an author. So it didn't seem like, and again, I had no training in how to write or how to get published. It was all sort of a learning curve. And so I started just as a hobby. I joined a writing club in Sacramento. And the larger writing club, which would invite guests to speak about different aspects of writing or authors. But they also broke up into little critique groups. And I joined a critique group that was speculative fiction. It was basically anything that had a little bit of wild edge to it. Joined that group, read a bunch of short fiction that's now buried in my backyard, never see the light of day. Did that for 4 years. Eventually tackled that first novel, and surprisingly, that first novel sold. Not without a lot of rejection. I was rejected by 49 different agents with that first book.
Wow.
But you did eventually find a home. And I'm still with that critique group. The critique group now just is critiquing next spring Sigma book right now. So I've been with that group for 30 years now. They've been basically reading everything I've ever written. So I lean on those 12 first readers, and we meet twice a month. Now we're meeting via Zoom, which is not as fun. Normally we read at a restaurant and we can share drinks and eat food. It's just the Zoom meetings are never as fun. So anyway, that's how I became an author.
So you went from veterinarian to part-time writer, obviously switched those roles. Do you still do anything? Do you practice at all? And if not, do you miss being a veterinarian?
I do miss being a veterinarian on a regular basis. I don't miss the business side, but I miss doing surgery and solving medical mysteries because obviously animals can't speak, so it's always a matter of just trying to piece out from clinical histories and lab results and X-rays, try to figure out what's going on with this kid. And I haven't totally given up my veterinary profession. And I've mentioned this before in book signings too. Is I used to get questions from remember I told you that it was a slow transition from full-time veterinarian to part-time to finally I stepped away. So questions arose across the exam table. They were like, Dr. Jim, what are you doing? You know, you have a successful veterinary hospital. What's this writing business you're doing? And it wasn't keeping it secret. You know, I had posters in the lobby, get your cat spayed, get a free book. So it was natural that they'd be curious. And I told them, you know, for, 15 years now, writing was my paycheck and veterinary medicine was a hobby. And I thought maybe down the line, it'd be fun to flip that around and have veterinary medicine just be my hobby and writing be my paycheck. And that's pretty much where I'm at. I now, my income is generated from my books, and I just do some volunteer work with my veterinary degree. I go to a shelter, and I don't do that right now for the last, because everything's because of COVID. But prior to COVID, I was every one Sunday a month for every month I would spay and neuter feral cats, wild cats that were trapped and released. So as I love to say, I can still neuter a cat in under 30 seconds. So hopefully I can still do that. I said that, but it's been now almost 6 months. So it might be 35 seconds. We'll have to see next time.
You are the ultimate double threat. That's what it is. Sandstorm was your first Sigma Force book.
Correct. Yep.
How about this? Did you know back then you wanted that to be a series?
No. I resisted doing series because all my stuff prior to Sandstorm was individual adventures. They had no connection to each other. They're standalones. And my house was pressuring me to do a series because series, they're easier for them to sell and market. And
Sure,
and,
yeah.
But I had an issue with doing series, and I've explained this before in book signings too at Murder by the Book. And it was what I call a Jessica Fletcher syndrome. Everybody remembers Jessica Fletcher from Murder, She Wrote. Now, here's a woman that was always stumbling over dead bodies every week. I've never stumbled over a dead body. So, that strains your suspension of disbelief on why this one woman is always finding dead bodies. Also, it's hard to maintain jeopardy in series characters because, if somebody pulls a gun on Jessica Fletcher in an episode, that gun's never going to go off because she's in next week's episode.
Sure.
So it's hard to maintain jeopardy with a series character. So I resisted for a while. But then I wrote Sandstorm thinking it was going to be just, again, another standalone. And in that book, I invent this team of former Special Forces soldiers that are secretly working for DARPA as field agents that are going to go out and protect against various threats. So Sigma Force was created as almost an ancillary support team for the main cast of characters in Sandstorm. But I like Painter, who was introduced in that book. And once I was sort of finished that book, I thought, hey, that's sort of an interesting group. I hate just tossing them aside after writing this book. Initially, I thought, well, maybe they'll appear later on in occasional types of standalones down the line. But I thought, well, why don't I build a series around Sigma Force as a team versus an individual? Therefore, I get around some of the Jessica Fletcher syndrome because the threat can come from very many different directions. It's not just one woman stumbling over a dead body. It's a governmental team, a military team that can have the danger come from many different directions. Plus, because it's a team, everybody's in jeopardy. And I can maim, wound, kill major characters because they can always recruit new members. So nobody's necessarily safe in the Sigma universe. So once I got past that, I felt comfortable enough to pitch Sigma Force as a series to my editor. She was thrilled. And Map of Bones became sort of the official first book in the series, because that's when you sort of see the main team of Gray and Monk and the expanding cast of characters that originate with Map of Bones.
Vince Flynn, whose name came up before we went live, he wrote the Mitch Rapp series, and he would get asked all the time, he did interviews, does the government really have Mitch Rapps? So I'm going to ask you, does the government really have scientists with guns running around doing anything close to what they're doing in your books?
Not that I know of. No one's actually, pulled me aside and said, "Shut up, Jim." I've gone to the Smithsonian Castle where Sigma Forces their main command center is located beneath the Smithsonian Castle. And so every now and again, I expect to go into there and have somebody pop up out of like a secret door and grab me and drag me in there. So I would not be surprised, but to my best of my knowledge, no.
I've seen a lot of interviews that you've done, and I heard this was years ago, and I heard you tell someone, I think you're doing an interview with Greg Hurwitz for someone, and you said, I love to go to a place and say, tell me something about this place that no one else knows. Is that true? And what is the craziest thing that you ever heard back from that? Have you ever been able to use any responses in a book?
I mean, I love doing that because I don't know if it's the anonymity of a stranger walking up to somebody that they will oftentimes be very shocking what they will reveal. Or maybe it's the fact that they're very proud of their town and they want to share, somebody shows extra interest in their town. So they oftentimes will tell you the most amazing things. I think this was it 2 books ago when I wrote Crucible, which deals with a modern sect of the Spanish Inquisition that's still operating in Spain. And where I got that idea from was probably about maybe 5 years prior to that. I was in Spain and I did that. I walked up to a little village in northern Spain and I asked somebody, hey, tell me a little secret about your village. And this is an old woman. And she goes, oh, let me show you. And she takes me down the street. I thought she was going to mug me because she's taking me down an alley. I think I could take her. I wasn't sure though. And she takes me to this door and there's like a symbol branded into the door. And she says, this symbol is for the crucibolum. I thought, well, what's that mean? She says, well, this is a symbol for the Spanish Inquisition that existed after the Spanish Inquisition supposedly disbanded. And in Spain, there are many people that still believe that Spanish Inquisition in secret, similar to Sigma Force operating in secret with the US government, that the Spanish Inquisition in secret is still operating out of Spain. So based on that introduction of that old woman, that became the entire basis for writing my novel Crucible. So
most people don't get that lucky, by the way. I think when they go to places, I think if I walked up to someone and said, tell me something about this place and no one knows, it would come off as very creepy. They wouldn't want to tell me anything. And you're scoring book ideas out of that. So that in of itself is rather impressive.
Well, I introduced it. I'm an author. I'm looking for, I've done books in this, across Europe. I'm thinking of doing something in Spain. Is there anything interesting in this town that you can tell me about? I don't just grab them. Tell me a secret.
So you post research photos, you talk on social media that you're going off the grid to go researching. What is it about getting boots on the ground in these locations that helps you? Because not every author does. It's a fascinating thing, I think, to talk to writers about how do they do their research. And I know actually several, especially right now, it's serving them pretty well when they haven't been able to travel. But they don't go there. They look up, they research, and I'm not sure it really is the same. But I'd love your take on that. So what do you get out of actually being at that location?
Well, it definitely gets you that verisimilitude that you try to get those telling details. Whenever I teach writing, I always stress, your goal is to gather as many telling details as you can on whatever subject you're doing, whether it's science or history. Because if you can just seed your story with enough of these telling details and they're accurate and true, then your reader is going to believe anything you write after that. If you identify where Starbucks is in Kuala Lumpur, and if that reader's been to Kuala Lumpur, goes, there actually is a Starbucks at that location, then they'll believe anything you write after that. So it helps definitely get that intimate detail you need to put into a story to really get those details well if somebody has traveled there. But again, you don't have to. It's very seldom actually that I'm going to be writing a novel about this subject matter or this location that I'll fly out, run around a place, fly back and write about it. It's usually the other way around. I'll travel for fun of it. I'll research, I journal, I take a bunch of pictures, I gather those details, and I just file them away. And then down the line, I can pull them back out and I'm ready to use them. Just to give you an example, Sandstorm you mentioned before takes place most in the country of Oman. And I wasn't planning on traveling to Oman, but I need to get those telling details. What I like to do, this is a tip for anybody writer out there, is I always look for somebody that will be my boots on the ground out there if I can't get my boots on the ground. And so I contacted somebody that was selling Omani goods here in the US. And I contacted his website and said, hey, I'm writing about a book about your country and I'm looking for somebody that could be my eyes and ears out there in case I need any of those telling details. And this gentleman's first response was, well, are you going to be derogatory about our country? And I go, well, no, most of my books are, my goal is to be almost a travel log, a little armchair vacation for my readers. And so once I said that, he agreed to be my eyes and my ears. And down the line, I ended up getting this beautiful gilded, embossed invitation in the mail addressed to me. And it's from the Sultan of Oman, inviting me personally to come to his country and tour his country prior to writing Sandstorm. So I was thrilled I was going to do that. Unfortunately, that was shortly before 9/11. After that, I got another polite note saying maybe another time. So again, I just had to do all my boots on the ground research with that gentleman, and again, just internet research as much as I can. So you don't necessarily have to do a lot of traveling to still get those details. as long as you have a compatriot that you can lean on to give you those details. Like right now, my next book, Kingdom of Bones, mostly takes place in the Congo. Obviously, I can't travel to the Congo right now, so I'm again having to lean on people that have been there. I was been to Africa before, but not to the Congo, not to the area where this book is taking place. But I had to find that group of people that will could be my eyes and ears and give me the details I need for that book.
What is your writing process like? It's different for every writer. Are you an outliner? Can you just sit and just bang a book out? Do you have a target word count you try to hit every day? What is your process like, kind of like from conception? You have a story idea. Walk us through from that moment until this thing is sitting on the shelf. What's your process like?
Well, it took me a while to figure out what that process was. And I think any author eventually has to find out the accommodation for how writing works in your life. When I first started writing, I had my full-time practice. I only had cracks in time to write. That's why I initially was just trying short fiction, because that's all I thought I could fit within those cracks in time. And I made a commitment to myself initially to write. I was going to write 3 pages a day to try to finish this novel I was working on. But then I kept qualifying because I found that was too burdensome. Then it was going to be 3 double-spaced pages a day, because that's basically a page and a half. And maybe not every day. I'll do it 5 out of 7 days of the week. I'll write those 3 double-spaced pages. And once I sort of settled into that, I found that was comfortable. I could write on a regular basis that way, and I stuck to that. I made a commitment to doing that. By having an extra couple of days off, I could shift my schedule around. Maybe a weekday I couldn't get writing done, then I had to work on a weekend day. I thought if I ever got my day job, I'd be much more productive, and I am. I now do 5 double-spaced pages a day. I find that's about my limit for most days. It takes me about an hour for me to write 1 double-spaced page. So 5 double-spaced pages, about 5 hours of writing. The rest of my day is doing that research, calling people up, doing the business side of writing. So that's my typical writing day is trying to get 5 out of 7 days of the week, trying to get those 5 double-spaced pages done a day. In regards to how to structure out my writing, I have a tendency to front load a lot of my research. I'll do 90 days in which I will research the history. I'll research the science. I'll get us a skeletal version of the plot worked out. I'm not a firm outliner. All I know is the beginning. I know the end, and I'll know maybe 3 or 4 tent poles that are going to hold up the story. But I don't know how A connects to B connects to C. To me, one of the joys of writing is that discovery, is what you find between those tent poles, where the story goes in unusual directions, or just the fact that I don't know how to figure it out or where the story's going is intriguing to me. And I think readers have pretty good noses on them. They can sense when an author is going through the motion, or is bored with material, or is not passionate about the material. It comes out in print. And one way I think that it helps me stay fresh and feel that passion and feel that excitement is by not knowing the story in great detail. Now, there's other authors that are great outliners. They believe in outlining. I've been on panels at conventions where there's a discussion about this very subject matter, and there's outliners on one side and those writing by the seat of the pants authors on the other side of the table. And by the end of the hour, they're usually in a fist fight because their brains are wired so differently. But I'm somewhere in between. I do need a little bit of structure. I need a few tent poles to know where the story's going, some roadmap, so I know that I can get to where that story needs to land. But I don't necessarily I don't want to know the exact path to get there.
I think, Harlan Coben has talked a lot about, he doesn't outline real hard because if he doesn't know where the story's going, then the reader won't either. And he's got so many twists and turns in his. Do your characters ever surprise you when you're writing?
Oh, all the time. And again, that's one of the joys I think of not outlining is, and I don't build great character bio sheets. A lot of people you hear like, gosh, we're going to create a character, produce this whole bio sheet. I'd rather discover the character as my reader discovers the character. So oftentimes they do surprise me because they'll do things I wasn't expecting them to do. They'll take that story in different tangents. I'll use one example, Kowalski. He's sort of this bit of a dumb lug, a bit of a gorilla of a man, maybe a secret core of something deeper in him. But he first appeared in my standalone novel, Ice Hunt. And it took me many years. And years later, I still missed Kowalski. So I ended up recruiting him into Sigma, later on into the Sigma series. Didn't quite belong there. He's not this elite, covert special forces soldier that's, trained in scientific disciplines. He's just sort of likes to blow things up. That's his skill set. So I was surprised when Kowalski came onto stage, really. Eventually, I had to go sort of fill in the blanks. One of the short stories in Unrestricted Access is a story I had to write to explain how Kowalski got recruited into Sigma, because nowhere in the Sigma books do I ever explain. All of a sudden, he's just there. So in that short story, I went back and told the secret story of how Kowalski got recruited by Sigma and how he became a team member. So again, characters are always surprising me.
I'm going to get into Unrestricted Access, but I was told that you had a story behind the name Rollins. I think most readers, your fans especially, know that that's not your real name. So why did you go with a pseudonym not really a pseudonym, but why'd you pick a different last name? And what is the story behind Rollins?
Well, my real last name is Tchaikovsky, and the first four letters are C as in cat, Z as in zebra, A as in apple, J as in Jack. Usually by that point, people's eyes gloss over. On my veterinary clinic door, it was Dr. Jim in quotes, then Tchaikovsky, because I didn't even want people to try to guess how to pronounce that last name. And so when I was not surprised when my first request from my publisher was, you got a great book, Jim, but that name's got to go. We can't have people not being able to pronounce your name. So, give us a name that is pronounced as phonetically pronounceable and preferably 2 syllables. And I asked them, why 2 syllables? And they said, well, 1 syllable is too easy to forget. 3 syllables is too hard to remember. So 2 is perfect. Now, again, you have your Vince Flynn back there. Flynn, 1 syllable.
Right.
Lee Childs, 1 syllable. Yep. Stephen King, 1 syllable. They do just fine. But for they need 2 syllables from me. So the University of Missouri Veterinary Clinic, where I went to school, is on Rollins Avenue. So that's where Rollins came from. It's the street in which the veterinary school was located on.
Let's talk about Unrestricted Access. I was really pumped for this. A longtime fan of yours. There's so much in here that I think other longtime fans are just going to eat up. For me, my favorite story, and I actually had read it, but I forgot that I read it, was The Devil's Bone, which was the Gray Pierce and Cotton Malone crossover that you did with Steve Berry a few years ago. What was that like, writing with Steve Berry?
Well, again, it was a long time coming. Steve and I have been friends for ages, since we basically started our career at the same time. I was a little bit ahead of Steve in that I think I had Subterranean Excavation came out when his Amber Room was just about to debut. And he had read Excavation and Subterranean and had contacted me directly and said, hey, my first novel is coming out. Would you mind giving me a blurb? I was honored because no one had asked me at that point to do a blurb. And I had been given blurbs by other authors. So I thought this is really cool to pass it forward for this young unknown author named Steve Berry. And so I read Amber Room and I gave him a blurb because I enjoyed it. And 6 months later, during that gap, he managed to get one other author that agreed to give this unknown author a blurb for his first book. At this point, that author was not as popular as I was, I must say. It was not selling as well as I was. That author was Dan Brown.
Wow.
So he got that blurb just before Da Vinci Code debuted. So, of course, between that gap, Da Vinci Code launches, Amber Room comes after that. You can imagine what's on the front cover, Dan Brown, the blurb in big letters, I love the book. Great, yay, Dan Brown. Flip to the back of the cover, above the UPS symbol is, I liked it too, James Rollins. So we've been friends ever since. So we've done little winks and nods at each other in our various books where, I've mentioned, where Cotton's bookstore is, and I have one of my characters visit there, and he's mentioning my characters. And eventually the readers began to think those little clues were us signaling the readership that we were actually the same author. So for the longest period of time, Steve Berry and James Rollins were considered to be the same person.
Wow.
So we had to go on tour at one point to prove that we were actually different people. And then the question, of course, came because of that ongoing relationship. When are we going to see Cotton Malone and Gray Pierce join forces? When are you going to do a collaborative book together? Now, it's always difficult from a professional standpoint because my publishing house and Steve's publishing house are different, and we each are possessive of our brands. And so probably would be quite the bit of a battle in New York City for who would actually possess that combined book. So when we had a chance to just do a short story where our houses weren't quite so possessive, we jumped on that chance. So it was a great deal of fun to pair up Cotton and Gray.
How did you split that? Did you write part of it? So you were writing Cotton Malone at times, and was he ever writing your characters in that?
A little bit of both. Initially, we both handled our own characters by ourselves. This time we had to outline because it's almost impossible not to outline when you're doing a collaborative project. And so, Steve did his Cotton areas. I did my Gray area. We exchanged things. It became a little bit of a pull back and forth between us about who was getting the bigger spotlight. Oh no, Cotton is looking, like he's the one that's really saving the day. We can't have that. Then I tweaked the story, and then I give it back to Steve and said, wait a second. Now it looks like Gray is saving the day. So we had to keep going back and forth good-naturedly to make sure that both of our characters have their shining moment in the story and also give us a chance to cut each other's characters down a little bit.
Should have had Dan Brown's character, Robert Langdon, come in and save the day for both of them. That would have been the real twist. No, you mentioned that you guys write each other's little tidbits in the books. Brad Thor got in on the fun too.
He did.
So the three of you, there's some crossover there. How did that start? Who started that?
I can't remember who started it, to be honest with you. I don't know if I think I was the one that first mentioned Cotton, and then Steve mentioned me, and then Brad mentioned both of us. But I think the funniest thing was when Doug Preston mentioned James Rollins. So he had one of his characters was going to be flying somewhere, went to the airport bookstore and goes, oh, look, James Rollins' latest book is here. I'm going to read that. I really enjoy James Rollins' books. Of course, that was the sociopathic villain of the book that apparently appreciates James Rollins' books.
Why now, Jim? So you have all these novels out, and you put out a fantastic Sigma Force book earlier this year. Unrestricted Access is kind of a collection of short stories and other goodies. Why now? Why put that out now?
Well, it was a weird process to get to that point, in that, I'd been writing short stories, but I wasn't really keeping track of them. I just put them out there and they disappear. So they were either part of an anthology, like George R. R. Martin. I did a book for him, or story for him. I did one with L.R.L. Stein, who was doing an anthology. And some were just ebook originals that were never in print. And I was fielding a lot of questions via email from people that, for those James Rollins completists that wanted every James Rollins book on their shelf, they were encountering these titles. They didn't know why they couldn't find them, not realizing they were short stories. So eventually I had enough of those emails. So I approached my editor and said, hey, what if we did like a little chat book where I just got all the short stories together, and we just, did like an ebook version of all the stories in one place, so I can just point to it all the time. Just says, that's a good idea. Why don't you just, gather up all your short stories and send them to me? Because she wasn't aware. Some of them were not done with my same editor, so she wasn't aware of some of the short stories either. And so I went through my document file on my computer and gathered all the stories and sent them to her. And she says, this is much longer than a chat book. You put all these stories together, almost as long as one of your Sigma novels. Maybe we should do a proper book of your short stories. And so I was game for that. And she said, would you mind doing an introduction a new introduction to the collection? So of course I expected to do that. And so I wrote that, but then I realized, why don't I do other introductions to other parts, other short stories within the collection? Because I realized that the collection is basically spans my entire career. There's the Kowalski's in Love was written almost 20 years ago, up to present day, where I wrote the new novella for the story. So it gave me a chance, while doing these various introductions into the different short stories, to give a little peek at the arc of my career. To see where I started from, where I'm at now, what does my writing look like back then? What does it look like now? Why did I tell this story now? And what might I do different? So it allowed me to sort of explore that a little bit beyond just these short stories themselves. And again, I didn't just want to sell a book of old stories, so I added the new novella featuring Tucker and Kane. It's a big chunky story. It's they're twice the length of anything else in the book. It's like a mini novel. So to give something new, because there was an aspect of Tucker's story that I really wanted to tell, but I knew it would require longer than just a short story. It's a major sort of trauma in Tucker's past that he never dealt with. It's addressed when we see Tucker and Kane in previous incarnations, whether as a support member for Sigma in the short story Tracker that's in the anthology, or the spinoff I wrote with Grant Blackwood, the 2 novels with that. But there's a story that I never told, which is the trauma he has with the loss of Abel, Kane's brother, his other military working dog that he used to have as his left arm when Kane was his right arm. He lost Abel during the war. And it's been a trauma both for Kane and for Tucker with the loss of that dog. And so this was my chance to address that, because the short story there was too much story to tell that was going to fit in a short story, but it felt like if I tried to fold it into like one of the Sigma novels, it might be too intrusive. So this felt like the perfect vehicle to do like a mini novel where I can address this issue with Tucker. And also allowed me, by doing that, by adding this novella, is Tucker and Kane also make a reappearance in next spring's Sigma novel, Kingdom of Bones. They will be returning to the Sigma universe and adding the support to Gray and company.
That is awesome, because they're my favorite characters in the Sigma universe.
I love
that book, by the way, underwent a title change, right?
It did. It was originally the Savage Zone, and again, I pick my titles. That becomes my document folder file's name. It stays that way for a majority of the time I'm writing the book. And then just as I'm like in edit stages, that's when my editor, Alyssa, will pitch it to the sales department. And they were like, we don't like that title. We want another title. Pick something different. And so I gave them a slew of other titles. And the one they liked the best was Kingdom of Bones. But I was still attached to the Savage Zone because I've been living with that title for a long period of time. And so, and I was on the fence on which way I wanted to go. So on social media, I raised that question on Facebook and Twitter. These are the 2 titles. What do you think? Hoping basically that they would sway me or the publishing house one way or the other. Well, once I tallied it all up, right down the frickin' middle, they were no use. So I left it to the sales department. So it's now the Kingdom of Bones is the official title.
They're both great titles, by the way. I mean, I really like them both. So I didn't vote because I didn't know which one to vote for. Do you have a favorite Sigma Force character to write? And is there one that's the hardest for you to write?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, one thing that's fun about doing a multiple viewpoint book where you're hopping into different heads, into different perspectives, is you get to live and breathe those characters for a while. And it's refreshing jump from different characters. Obviously I like Kowalski because I pulled him out of Ice Hunt to put him into the universe. He's a bit of the comic relief for the series. He's fun to write. But I had never written a point of view with Kowalski until The Bone Labyrinth. That was the first time he appears as a point of view character. He was always just sort of in the background. Now I'm in his head writing about Kowalski, mostly because Bone Labyrinth dealt with Neanderthals, so it seemed appropriate for Kowalski to be a point of view character in that book. And then in Last Odyssey, the last book, he again appears as a point of view character. Probably the one I have the most difficulty writing is Seishan. She's sort of the femme fatale of the series because she's gone through a huge arc. And, when Seishan and Gray first meet in Map of Bones, she shoots him. Now they're married with a kid.
Yep.
That's quite the arc. And so when I'm in her point of view, I don't want her to shift into this lovable, sweet little character from who she was before, because she's still who she was in Map of Bones. But obviously there's some fundamental changes. So she's hard to keep slightly altering, who she was to be able to make that arc. So she's a challenge to write.
Now, did you know that back when she shot him? Did you think it's all going to be fine? They'll end up together and have a happy ever ending? Or did that come later?
No idea that was going to be an ongoing relationship. Again, that was one of the discoveries during that book. Again, I mentioned before I did a vote on the title between Savage Zone and Kingdom of Bones. Well, I did another vote back a few years ago where I can't remember which book it was, but one of the books, Gray is in bed with a woman, mm-hmm. and the readers know it's either Gray, it's either Seishan or it's Rachel, but I never reveal who it is that she's in bed with. or he's in bed with until, so again, afterwards, I pitched it to the crowd out there, to social media, said, okay, A, who do you think it is? B, who do you want him to be and why? So I got all that input because I didn't know I wasn't really sure who he was in bed with even. So I got that input, I thought about it, and then, we settled on who that was, but I don't want to ruin it.
So you outsourced that one. You went like full bachelorette mode on that one and let the fans pick.
It was Love Island at that point.
Love Island. Okay, so last question for you, and then I think the bookstore is going to take more questions from people. I know you have a new series coming up from Tor. Are you allowed to say anything about that yet?
I can. It's a poorly kept secret that early in my career, I wrote under 2 different pen names. It wasn't just James Rollins. I went from being an unknown, unpaid, unpublished author, just a veterinarian working on as a hobby. And within 1 week, I ended up selling 2 novels. One was Subterranean, the thriller, that was picked up by Avon, now HarperCollins. The other one was picked up by Del Rey. It was a fantasy novel that I wrote. So for the first 7 years of my career, I was writing a fantasy novel a year and a thriller a year. The fantasy was under the pen name James Clemens. Can you guess where James Clemens, the Clemens name came from?
I'm going to guess it's a street of some importance to you.
Well, I mentioned that it's the University of Missouri, where I went to vet school. It became Rollins. So James Clemens came from Samuel Clemens. I figured Mark Twain was never using his real name, so I borrowed his real name. So that became a little nod towards my Missouri roots.
Sure.
So, and I've always done 2 books a year. I've always done a Sigma novel and then something else. And that something else is just a way for me to, again, stay fresh, stay current. I think if I did a Sigma novel after Sigma novel after Sigma novel, I might get a little burnt out, or I might begin, which I'm secretly fearful of. I've read authors where after time it feels like they're just going through the motions, or you have a sense that they're just not as passionate about that series as they were. So by doing something else as a part of my year, when I return to Sigma, it's like returning to old friends. I'm ready to hug Gray and pat Kowalski on the shoulder and get to work with them. So I've done different things. I've done a middle school fantasy series as my alternate part of the year. I've done collaborative sort of horror, gothic horror with Rebecca Cantrell. I've done other standalones as a part of the year. So this year I am returning to a little bit to my roots. I'm doing a new fantasy book. It's it's a doorstopper of a novel. It's probably almost twice as long as one of the Sigma novels.
Wow.
The first book is called The Starless Crown and the Moonfall Saga. It is, and I've been thinking about this idea for almost 10 years. This idea popped in my head and I kept, putting it on the back burner and thinking about it and adding characters and thinking about the plot and the storyline, because it's a challenge to write, because no other fantasy writer I think has attempted to do what I just did in this story. It's a very different type of fantasy novel. Yes, it's going to feel very familiar to all fantasy readers, but at the same time, it's going to feel very different. But that's all I'm going to say right now.
It's a great teaser, by the way. When does that come out? Do we know yet?
It'll be next summer. I don't know. It'll be June, July, or August, but it's slated for next summer.
Awesome.
So that is what's coming up. Awesome. And Kingdom of Bones, which just to give you a little teaser about that, it's probably going to come up in the Q&A anyways. I'll get out of the way. Kingdom of Bones is I pitched this back last November to my house because it deals with viruses. And this is well before COVID. So the question came when COVID came. My editor was like, "Where did you know this was going to happen?" Now, Kingdom of Bones is not a pandemic novel. I've done pandemic novels in the past. I've done The Sixth Extinction and The Seventh Plague are all sort of pandemic-like novels. This deals more with the weird biology of viruses. The main character who's is being supported by Sigma is a wildlife veterinarian. So going back to my roots a little bit. And he is a part of the global search. He's basically a virus hunter. He's out there in the Congo searching for viruses when he encounters something never before seen before. And that is what is the beginning of Kingdom of Bones. So that's that.
All right. So yeah, I do have some questions from the Facebook comments, and I wanted to say thank you for the compliments on the bookcases. These are the well-curated living room bookcases. If you saw the ones that are in my office with the advanced reader copies and stuff askew, it's definitely not as neat as these are. These are the Zoom-ready ones. So I also meant to mention beforehand that Jim has been kind enough to send us some signed book plates for unrestricted access. We also have a handful of them left for The Last Odyssey. So if you order his books from us, we've got signed book plates that we will tuck in there. Jim, do you have a favorite story that's in this new collection?
Favorite story, again, maybe because I just wrote it, is the novella Sundogs. It's a powerful story. I think, definitely be prepared to have a few tissues in hand because it's a bit of a hard story for Tucker and Kane fans. I also like The Pit. That was, I wrote that for George R. R. Martin's collection titled Warriors. The conceit of that anthology was he was asking authors to submit stories from the viewpoint of a warrior. That was the only thing he had to do. They didn't care if it was a past warrior, a current warrior, or a future warrior. He just wanted a story with warriors. Now, me being a veterinarian, I wanted to write a story from the point of view of a dog warrior. So I used and I had just been doing some research about the atrocities going on in pit fighting rings and dog fighting rings. And so The Pit became a story about a puppy that is kidnapped out of a backyard, brutalized into becoming a warrior in a pit fighting ring, and his ultimate redemption by the end of that story. So that, again, was a sort of a personal story that's very significant to me.
So you mentioned you've done some intros for a lot of the stories in the collections. Did you actually go back and edit any of them before they were republished?
My editor rather, asked me if I wanted to touch up, a white out and cross out that area, change things. And it's tempting. I think all authors we're the worst critics of our own work. I have a hard time listening to audio versions of my book because, when I hear somebody reciting my words, I'm already trying to edit it. Oh, that's, I wish I could rewrite that. I wish I could. And so now she was like, oh, I could tweak these stories and polish out the, what now it feels like, a few raw edges to some of the stories. But then I ultimately decided if I'm going to truly use this as a showcase for the arc of my career, that I have to not to do that. I wanted to show sort of the scraped knees and some of the things that I wish I could polish out of the story, but I don't want to. I want you to see what that looked like back then compared to Sundogs, the latest and most current story I've written.
Yeah, we did an interview with Jasper Ford yesterday, and he said the same thing. He says anytime that he's actually reading during an event, like in his head as he's reading out loud, he's thinking like, I could have done this differently. So Andrea asks, do you have any plans to collaborate with Rebecca anymore? And how was that process writing with another author?
I get that question asked a lot. And I
love those books.
As do I. I'd love to return to that universe. I mean, the trilogy, Sanguinis trilogy is it ends, it's complete. But there's a very significant thread left hanging. And Rebecca and I have talked about, how to pick up that thread and where to go with it. We've talked about, where we take the story next. So I do not doubt that at some point we're going to go back and return to another cycle of stories in that universe. How did that collaboration came about? Again, I mentioned before about how this fantasy was sort of stuck in my head for a while, and it took me a while to finally I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to do something with it or it's going to drive me crazy. So the way a lot of my ideas come up, I will get this idea, and until I do something with it, I can't let it go. When I wrote Map of Bones, I at that point had to give my editor a detailed outline of that story. I had to lay out the entire story, which, like I mentioned before with Ryan, I don't like to outline. So to me, that was uncomfortable. And usually when I tried to do that, what I would turn in would be very different anyways. But I woke up one morning and I thought, what if someone poisoned the communion wafer at a church and they passed the communion wafer out of the church and everybody began to die? It was Sunday morning, and I'm a lapsed Roman Catholic, so maybe that's the reason why that was at the top of my head. But I couldn't let that go. Did not fit with the story I had pitched to the house, but I eventually, just sent my editor a note and said, hey, what if I did this? And she said, oh, that's cool, do that. And so that's the problem I have. When I have the idea, it's hard for me to let go. So I had this idea for this vampiric take on Roman Catholicism that began to snowball. The more I did research into it, see if there's a story there, the more I was discovering. It began to snowball into this big, gothic, sprawling historical tale. But I knew I might not be the best one to tell that story. I know what my capabilities are. I can write fantasy, I can write thrillers, but this needed this sort of gothic quality that I didn't think I could probably do well. So right when I was in that sort of quandary, I was reading one of Rebecca Kendrell's Hannah Vogel novels. It's one of her award-winning mystery series set between World War I and World War II in Germany. And she had that quality I was looking for in that story, the sort of gothic, historically feel to that story. I thought, this is what I need. So I knew Rebecca. So I called Rebecca up and I said, Rebecca, hey, I have this idea for a story, but I don't know if you want to collaborate with me with it. And she goes, well, what's it about? I said, it's about vampires. She goes, no, I have no interest in writing about vampires. But I said, well, no, it's not really a vampire novel. It's more historical. And so I laid out the whole tapestry of the story. And I knew it probably had a hook because she started asking me questions. And eventually we agreed that, let's do this. It'd be fun. Neither of us had collaborated before, so it was a learning process on how to communicate to each other. Initially, there was a certain level of uncomfortable politeness because what we do every Monday, we would talk via Zoom, and because mostly I have to talk with my hands, as you probably know by now. So it's good to visually see me. And she was in Hawaii at that point, and in the second book, she was in Germany. So I think she was trying to get further and further away from me. But initially, it was very awkward because we were exchanging chapters, and it was initially like, Rebecca, I see what you did with this chapter. It's really cool. But maybe there's one aspect, there's one thread right here. Maybe you could just polish this a tiny bit more. And then it became, Jim, this chapter you just turned in really sucked. Rewrite it. Once we got to that level of honesty with each other, things worked out much quicker. And there's pros and cons to doing a collaborative project. When you're your own author, you're the judge, jury, and executioner of everything. When you're collaborating, it's more by committee. So you have to sort of pass things back and forth. But at the same time, then you've got two minds working on one problem. I'm notorious, as you mentioned with Vince Ryan, about, I guess Harold Coben doesn't want to outline very well because he likes the surprises. In that I'm notorious for painting my characters into a corner. And oftentimes I don't know how to get them out of that corner. And if I don't know how to get them out of that corner, neither is my readers. So it's a good corner. But then I've got to try to solve it myself. But by having a collaborator, then you can workshop it. You can go back and forth until you can solve that problem. So that was great. So, and the end result, I think, is a novel that is stronger than what either of us could have written alone. So it was I would be thrilled to be able to go back to the Sanguinis universe and visit that again.
Right. What is something that you have read recently that you loved? And Ryan, after Jim talks, I would love to hear something that you've read recently and loved too.
I just got a chance to read, and again, it's out now, but I read it as an advanced reader's copy because I was preparing to do an interview with Christopher Paolini. I don't know if you know Christopher Paolini. He wrote Aragon and the Inheritance Cycle. Well, he came out after a 9-year lapse in writing anything. He came out with this again, a doorstopper of a space opera science fiction novel called "To Sleep in a Sea of Stars." It's shocking. This is again, Aragon was written for the YA market. This is definitely an adult hard science novel. And it's just impressive just to get, having read Aragorn in the past. I got a copy of signed Aragorn right there, and then reading what he wrote now. And it's just an impressive piece of work.
I just read Law of Innocence by Michael Connolly, the new Mickey Haller book. It's fantastic. He's so good all the time anyways. And we've seen Mickey have to go, defend capital murder cases and such. This one's different. He's in prison as a suspect of murder, and he's got to represent himself. And that to me was fascinating. I also read The Sentinel, the new Jack Reacher book by Lee Child. It's the first one that he co-authored with his brother, Andrew Grant, going by Andrew Child for this one. Mm-hmm. And I have to admit, like going into it, I really didn't know what to expect. I'm a huge fan of both, of both the guys. And, but much like when Kyle Mills took over for Mitch Rapp, for Vince Flynn and writing Mitch Rapp, I think readers, if you're a big fan of a character like that, you're nervous can another writer come in? And with this one, you knew Lee Child was there. So he, if something went off the rails, he could bring it back on type of thing. I didn't know what to expect. And I think it's my favorite Jack Reacher book in like a decade. It's just phenomenal.
Fantastic.
We are doing a Zoom event with Lee and Andrew on October 25th, which we're super excited for. And then we're also doing one with Michael Connolly in November, and Lee Burke's going to be chatting with him. So we're excited about both of those. If you guys are watching in the chat, I just dropped links to both of those in the chat so you can get info about that. And we'll have signed copies of both books. Jim, KJ Howe is watching, and she wants to know, what is the most adventurous thing you have done with respect to research for one of your novels?
Most adventurous. When I did Amazonia, I spent it, this was years and years ago. I had a short trip in Amazon, which was very exciting. I'd love to go back. I'd love to do a sequel to Amazonia. But actually, and so that was quite exciting, just from an aspect of feeling like a fish out of water. When you're in the Amazon, it's like you've gone to an alien world. In regards to being the most adventurous, it goes all the way back to Subterranean, is that one of the characters is claustrophobic, which most of Subterranean takes place underground within a cavern system 2 miles underneath Antarctica. Now, I'm a caver. Took caving up back when I was going to school in Missouri. I still do caving today. But I remember at one point getting stuck in a cave. I was stuck I was trying to ascend through two walls of rocks, and I twisted my leg the wrong way, and I could not use my ascender properly, and I was literally stuck. And we were, again, not maybe we weren't 2 miles underneath Antarctica, but we were down pretty far. And the people I was caving with, they were like, we can't get you out. Your rope is so pinned in there, you are stuck. And we're going to have to either go find a rescue thing, or you're going to have to sweat your way out of that crack. And so I had never experienced claustrophobia before. I don't really, even today, I don't have that much claustrophobia, but that was the first time I had that panic attack. And so having that panic attack allowed me to write that claustrophobic scene in Subterranean with a bit of authority that I might not have if I hadn't had that encounter.
Freaks me out just hearing you talk about it, by the way.
It was, I have a picture of myself coming out of that cave. You could see the terror in my face in that picture.
Wow. So
I'll share it one day, because it is not a fun thing.
Just a couple more. So Mahir says he knows that you are a big Michael Crichton fan, and recently Daniel Wilson wrote a sequel to the Andromeda Strain. If you could pick a book of one of Crichton's and write a sequel to it, which one would it be? Well,
again, it's probably a poorly kept secret that Jurassic Park, which I've got also a signed copy back there, was very influential in my career. When I was writing Subterranean, that story takes place in the cavern system 2 miles underneath Antarctica. I had a copy of Jurassic Park on my shelf. It was the first novel I was writing. Wasn't quite sure how to pace a novel. Tried dabbling with some short fiction, but this was now I was going to have to figure out how to do a whole novel. So I used Jurassic Park almost as a template. I used it. Again, I think rather than reinventing the wheel, here's the perfect thing. Here's the perfect author. Here's the perfect short story. So whenever, I counted the number of pages it took for a dinosaur to first appear in Jurassic Park. Well, that's when you're going to see the first time you're going to see a creature in my book. When does the antagonist come onto stage? Well, that's when my villain's going to come onto stage. When does the first character die? Well, that's when my first character die. Now, obviously, there is a sequel to Jurassic Park, but I would like to do my own sequel.
Awesome. So you've done, you've done kids action thrillers, you've done fantasy, you've done kind of gothic vampire novels, you've got the kind of technology Sigma Force novels. Is there something else that you haven't done kind of genre-wise that you really want to?
That's a really good question, because I have jumped different genres. What would I want to do different? Probably what I wouldn't mind doing is do something like what Tom Clancy does is really do a really cool military adventure with a lot of high. Again, maybe it's because I just finished Call of Duty. I want the video game. I want to be able to really dig deep into the military hardware like Tom Clancy does.
Okay, and then I have one more that just popped up. Annette says it's not book related, but she says most of them are all wondering how Duncan is doing.
Duncan is doing great. He's actually laying right over there. He's got his nice little surgery on it. But for those who don't know, Duncan had a splenectomy. He had his spleen removed about a month ago. He had a hemangiosarcoma, very common cancer, very aggressive cancer, usually kills dogs usually within 6 months. Very few would make it to a year. So his prognosis is not great. But I did a lot of research, being the veterinarian that I am, and the research that I am. I contacted, I think, every veterinary oncologist there is from one coast to the other coast. I talked to researchers doing cancer research on golden retrievers. I found out the University of Missouri is doing an experimental trial with a new regimen. So I am using that regimen with Duncan here, working with the local veterinarian. So far he's tolerating the chemo and everything well, and he's in good spirits.
Thank you everybody for joining us this evening. Just a couple quick recaps. If you joined us late, we've been talking with James Rollins, whose newest short fiction collection, Unrestricted Access, just came out Tuesday. We have signed book plates to go with it. We've been really thrilled to have Ryan Steck with us. If you guys haven't checked out therealbookspy.com, go check it out. There's author interviews, there's reviews, there's news about the genre. So if you're thriller readers, definitely please go check that out. Quick recap on the store. At the moment, we are open for appointments on Fridays and Saturdays from 10 to 6. You can book those online, and then the rest of the week we are there 10 to 6 to answer phones, do phone orders, mail orders, and offer curbside pickup. So you can give us a call at 713-524-8597 or visit us at murderbooks.com. If you came to the interview halfway through, once we are done, Facebook will archive it, so you'll be able to watch it there as well. And we'll also be uploading it to the store's YouTube channel in the next couple of days, just in case you guys know any Rollins fans who are potentially not on Facebook and still want to join it. As I mentioned, we've got stuff coming up with Lee Child and Andrew Child. We've got Michael Connolly coming up. We've got a really great roster of stuff still for the fall. So definitely check out murderbooks.com. Jim, it was so great to see you. Ryan, thank you so much for doing this. It was nice to meet you and even virtually. You guys take care, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Ryan.